Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Levantex podcast. It's Sophie, and we look into things that are both cultural and political. Today, I have a very interesting guest. We are talking to Sarah Aradi, and she is a visual artist, a very, very interesting visual artist, because most of the art that she creates definitely has stories behind it, and there's sometimes a cause. And we're going to be looking into that today and see how it's working out for her and what type of campaigns and messages she's hoping to put out into the world through her art. So, Sarah, thank you for joining us today.
Hello, Sophie. Hi, I'm so glad to be here today, and I'm very excited to be talking about all of the subjects you have mentioned. And a big hi to all the audience and everyone who's listening and watching.
So, as you can tell, we have a lovely Bahraini woman on the airwaves with us today, and we are very excited to hear what she's got to say to us. So, I want to look into some of the points. Sarah and I were talking, and she does have a project that she's working on. It hasn't been released to the public, so we're going to leave that for a little bit down the line. But, Sarah, you are a women's rights advocate, you are focused on empowering women. Now, can you tell me a little bit how you're using visual art and sketching or painting or anything along those lines to send those and put those messages out there?
Well, Sophie, if I'm going to start in the beginning, I'm just going to start with where the journey started. Before I even became an artist, I was very much interested in, this specific cause, which is standing with women against domestic violence, making the women's voice heard as much as I can. I was in university and I was always talking and being part of events where my voice was always highlighting that specific domestic violence issues. And I met along the way a lot of people, and that kind of started like a movement. As I started becoming more of the artist after my graduation, doing my master's degree, my bachelor's art degree, actually, I realized that it's naturally coming out. It's not directed. Like when I sit in front of the canvas, I don't tell myself I'm actually going to paint a painting that's going to reflect pain because of domestic violence. It happens naturally because on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, I'm either listening to stories, reading the news, being affected, whether directly or indirectly through friends, family members with this specific issue. And I realized that it's actually coming out, whether I am intentionally doing it or not. This is true art. True art is not what you decide to do or what you convince yourself that you're actually going to do. It's what you're surprised with once you start working from an empty mind and an empty space and an empty canvas. Like I would sit and I'm like, why did I just do that? And I remember I'm linking it to a specific incident in my subconscious mind. And then as things started moving along, I actually joined a movement in Bahrain. It was a group of women that has a dial-up number 24/7 available for those who are in domestic violent situations. And I trained to be able to answer those phone calls in order to direct those specific victims of the issue. And believe it or not, I could not even handle my first case. I couldn't because of the intensity that happens. You have a phone and you are responsible once you get a phone call of someone who's going through something to direct and calm them down and to tell them legally what they should be doing. And the minute I received those messages of a girl who told me, she was typing and she was saying he's going to hurt me. I'm locking the room, and then you just become emotional. And then all the traumas, all the past pains, your own issues are triggered. And I was so emotionally unbalanced. I was going to rush to her. I was going to call the cops. And then I just gave up and I contacted the coordinator and told her, you need to take this case because I feel I'm very emotional and unstable to actually calm her down. And that's when I realized I think my place is not in the field of actually physically being strong enough to help them because I'm a very emotional person and I catch the feelings of people. And as an empath, people, we take the energies of people and we feel it. but actually through my art. That's when it became kind of a better way of highlighting the issue.
Sarah, that's very intense, you know,
Yeah,
what you've just
yeah.
said. I can't even imagine being in my position and or being in that position. I think it's very difficult. I think, as you said, you know, you think you're strong and you want to be there and you want to be on the front line and you want to be able to make that difference. However, you find it extremely difficult when you're overwhelmed with the case itself. So I guess the outlet that you have is still raising awareness. Otherwise, we wouldn't be having this conversation today. So I'm sorry you had to go through that, but at the same time, we can't even imagine.
It's Sophie. You know what it was? It reminded me, and there was a silver lining that there's actually a community and they speak in multiple languages and they are there 24/7 to help women in Bahrain who are dealing with the situation. And that was the silver lining. Even though I was not able to do my part, they are actually ongoing. And
Is it very
that's
taboo there for you, Sarah? Is this something that really can't be discussed? Are these hotlines really in the public eye, or is it sort of like a word of mouth distribution, you know, to keep it on the down low? Like, how is it? How is it there?
I mean, I personally had to send texts to many friends, but um, I think in the Gulf in general, because the society and the community is so worried about reputation, they're so worried about reputation, the reputation of uh, uh, the person who's hurting them, whether it's the father, the brother, the husband, they are so scared to speak up, even though they know there are channels open. I think with Westerns and people living in Bahrain or whether other countries, it's much easier because they are here in a country where they don't have family, they don't have friends. So this is the only support they probably have. While, on the other hand, when it comes to Bahrainis or people in the Gulf in general, they rely on their friends, their families, their communities, their mothers, someone who's going to basically pick them up. But I think the spreading awareness about this is ongoing, and we have a lot of uh, initiatives, government initiatives to protect women in situations like that, and it's always very refreshing to hear and see that.
I just was going to ask you a quick question. You might not know the answer, but you might. I know a lot of friends of mine have tried to get divorces in GCC countries or they married in GCC countries. And they do tend to make it, I don't want to say difficult, but they tend to extend the period because they sort of want you to reconcile or find a way to be able to be together. Now, how hard is it in Bahrain? And I know that Bahrain is more open GCC country compared to its surrounding countries. So it's always had stood out. I lived in Riyadh, I lived in Saudi. I remember we always used to run to Bahrain for the weekends, you know, to just feel like we can breathe fresh air and we don't feel so
The
claustrophobic.
freedom, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So I do know that Bahrain is a bit more open, but do you find that these cases are struggling to be proven in court, that the women are maybe being able to be put back with their abuser because maybe they don't have enough uh, evidence? Like, how hard is it, and how serious is the government taking it?
Okay, well, what I can answer you is definitely not regarding the government or whatever is happening. Those are the officials that are going to, or basically have the right to answer that. But what I can tell you is what I've been witnessing through friends and family and circles of people that I know who are dealing with the same situation is that there is a huge rise in lawyers, female lawyers, and having female lawyers who are very strongly representing these women helps a lot. And the majority of the cases of divorce in Bahrain are backed up with a very strong female lawyer. And I am seeing a lot of progress and a lot of awareness, even socially, that pushing people off their limits just because you think they might fix things is unacceptable. And these things are discussed in newspapers and articles written, whether things were not fair for someone because of that specific reason you mentioned, which is trying to keep the family together underneath the pain and the hatred of someone who's basically suffering. I'm seeing a lot of change, very refreshing, very hopeful change, and I'm seeing a lot of awareness in the social circles of people, and people now realize that is just unacceptable.
That's really great news. I mean, we struggle with it here, and especially in 2020 and 2021, we've seen the rise of domestic abuse. You know, whether it be in relationships or with housemaids. I mean, it's really getting out of control. And yes, we might be in Lebanon, and they say we're open, we're democratic, and these things are discussed, and they're really not. And you've probably seen on the news that a woman was killed by her own husband, and he's still at large, even with Interpol looking for him. So it's not over, and it's a really long journey, and it's a really big fight, and it's so great to see how you're trying to create awareness. Now let's get into a little bit more detail about your art and what you've done in order to spread this message, and what has the reaction been.
Okay, so first, I think before jumping directly to the art, which we will definitely get through, I think it's very important of us to just not address domestic violence as a no thing. I think it's much more better and helpful and positively, um, it's more of a positive approach to present solutions or exit situations, practical exit situations. Usually, when I listen and I hear stories, a lot of people tell me, you should put a very uh, clear, vibrant image and voice that no to domestic violence. I said, everybody knows it's unacceptable, whether you agree with it or not. It's just, what am I helping? Who am I helping by saying no to domestic violence? What I need to do, and what we all need to do, is spread the practical exit solutions for women who are in need. Because what they need to understand is a lot. See, abuse has many sections. Sophie, I'm sure you know that. There's emotional, there's economic abuse, where the husband is the person in charge of the money and the wife basically she cannot live. There's social abuse, where they hack her phone, they stalk her, they blackmail her, and they tell her, if you even think of asking for divorce, I'm going to ruin your reputation, especially in very closed communities. And then there's the physical abuse, there's the sexual abuse, there's a lot of parts of abuse that go under silent abuse. It's not even seen. Emotional abuse might look like this person is madly in love with you. The same situation with the beautiful, beautiful girl that was just killed. Emotional abuse from the beginning. So raising awareness about the red flags is a must. And then putting those exit solutions and practical ways to find yourself an exit out of the situation, whether it's by getting a divorce, whether it's by leaving the country if you have to. I know with a lot of families, the girl has to leave the country because it's the brothers who are after her, as you know, in Jordan and in many countries. I don't want to mention any country specific, but she has to flee. Um, so I think these are the things that we need to focus on, and not just saying condemning, like no, no, no. It's what actually can help those in those situations. Now, when it came to me through my art, I was very much moved with the stories. I have been. Um, they say you attract your purpose. Even if I try to avoid movies and programs about domestic violence, I'm trying to run away from the issue because mentally it makes me really angry. I sit in a coffee shop, and the first thing the girl says, who I just met, is the story. And it's like, okay, fine, I give up. It's somehow a purpose, and it's going to come through my art. And maybe one of the works I shared with you, one of the first works I shared with you, which I painted the girl in the kimono and her nose was bleeding. This is actually a recreation of an actual situation. That's literally how she described the situation. And I came home and I felt so, when there's something inside of you that needs to come out, it needs to come out. You cannot move around carrying it. whether it's frustration and anger or sadness or just bitterness about this whole situation. And I got it out, and it got accepted to a very big event that I'm not going to name. And unfortunately, because there's blood in the image and it was seen as aggressive, the painting was removed from the wall before the opening. And believe it or not, Sophie, this has happened to me five more times, five big events where people who are responsible of the event tell me your painting was hanging right here an hour ago and it was removed because of all the blood and kind of the aggressiveness that is coming through your work. And
Were these events based in the Middle East, or are you facing this? It's okay. So just
yes,
trying to
I'm not
understand.
going to name where
No, no, we
exactly.
don't have to, but it's nice to understand where you were and where you were trying to exhibit.
What I would like to highlight, Sophie, is basically not just in the Middle East, not I mean in the GCC in general, and I think also in the Arab world. When an event is an official event and it's a big deal and there's a lot of big high people
Yeah,
coming
press.
at press and it's grand and luxurious, nobody wants to see the dirt, what's under the rug.
What's under
People
the
want,
rug?
yeah, people want to see a beautiful image. Let's be all sit in denial and act like these situations are not happening on a daily basis and there's not a waiting list in the court because, you know, I
No,
mean,
I completely
denial.
understand where you're coming from. I was born and
Yeah.
raised in the GCC.
Yeah.
And
I wish, and what happened with me, Sophie, to kind of go through the cracks and the gaps is I became very smart in my representation. I started to move away from the clear representation of blood, and even my bruises were camouflaged because very few could read it, and some paintings did get displayed in very big events without being removed. So I'm kind of finding a way to tell the story without the direct representation, I guess, of the pain.
well, any way to get the message out there, and finding that right balance is going to be able to keep you in the face and keeping this mawdua, as we say in the Arab world, at the forefront and at the top of everybody's minds, which is necessary because, as we said earlier, we have a longer journey to do. And yes, the resources and the solutions and all of these exit strategies are not necessarily easily or readily available. And in some communities, you don't even know where to go to even find someone to tell you where it is. So I do really understand what you're saying. And thank you very much for talking about it like this. I think we need to just change the tune a little bit so you don't get always stigmas, as we said, and put into this category. You are working on a project or have worked on a project but haven't released it yet, and it's to do with Lebanon. I'm not going to say anymore. I'm going to give you the floor for you to say as much as needs to be said without revealing anything you may not want to reveal. So please, Sarah, go for it.
So basically, going back to the very unpleasant memory of the blast, I think it was one of those days. If I'm going to put it in comparison, I would say the Twin Tower incident. It's one of those days where you remember exactly where you were when the news hit and how everything just stood still and all you did was literally watch the news. And I think it did not just hit Lebanon and not even regionally, it went globally. It just, the effect of it was so huge. I was overwhelmed, honestly. I was just sitting there and I remember just standing, and sometimes I was standing while I'm watching the news because I just couldn't, sit calm. I was just mentally, you don't know what you're feeling. Are you angry? Are you, there's a question mark. What's going on? Who's behind this? And basically, after all the dust settled, I think I reached a point where I just had to, I can't carry feelings and emotions around. I love to get them out. And I think our works in general, for all artists or writers or musicians or any creative people, any sort of creative people, it's always like a it's a diary, it's a story of what we've been through, what we felt in that specific moment. And because of the whole situation, I produced a series. Right now, it's in four works. There are four works. And I named them Shahrazad. Shahrazad, which is from the 1001 Tales. And she is saying a story, and I used a reference, a picture of a Lebanese woman from the 1880 something. It's a beautiful picture that I found because I was searching for like the muse, the figure that's actually going to say the story. And it starts with a beautiful, like mosaic like patterns and colors that represent the diversity in the Lebanese community. When it comes to religions, colors, sects, everything, like you can't get more diverse and more colorful, and that is beautiful. And that's the grand piece. It's very in your face. It's too
It's very
colorful.
loud.
Yes, and then you move
Like the
on to the
Lebanese in general.
yes, yes, with a lot of colors from the Lebanese nature, basically. And then you move into the next piece, which is the collision. I called it collision. And basically, I put Shahrazad eye to eye, and I put two figures looking at each other, and there's like a stitching behind them. Now, one has eyes that can see, and the other she has no eyes, because I remember before the blast there was the issues in the streets where there
Yeah, the
was
revolution,
the revolution. Exactly,
the
the
photo.
revolution where one sector was against the other sector and one group of people was against the other group. Now, we're not going to say who's who, but in the end it's two, and two are eye to eye, face to face. And I did that as the collision. And then I have the afterblast. Now, the afterblast is definitely my favorite piece, and I cannot wait to see the reactions, hopefully, when it gets showed. Um, there were footsteps on the actual piece, like the floor, images of people running in the streets, and the color, when the dust rises and then just goes down, the color, there's a color, it's like a yellowish, dusty, grayish color. That's how it is. And it's like someone stepped on Shahrazad's image. There's like footsteps and dirt and debris. And I think that says the whole circle um, very clearly and poetically. And we need to also discuss it. I think we need to discuss it, and we need to remember it. And I personally need to remember it. I don't want to forget this, and so that's why I did this series, which I'm very excited to actually show and share.
I think it's going to be received very well by the
Hopefully.
Lebanese women for sure. There was the time of talk during the revolution or the Thawra that the women will be leading, and you've seen a lot of brain drain in the country, and a lot of it has been the men, unfortunately, and the women are the ones staying behind, whether they have the kids or, there's a big um, polarization and a void being created in Lebanon, and a lot of it is because things are not being discussed. And now it's lately it's can we discuss it, or are we going to be offed like the latest journalists and a couple of other activists? There's so much going on. Sarah, it's been wonderful talking to you today. It's been very inspirational. And having gone through the blast myself, listening to how you depicted the whole stage, the representation is quite epic. And I really appreciate that. And it's nice to know that our brothers and sisters felt something and were affected and are there and listening and working for us as well.
Honestly, I've never visited Lebanon, but I had a lot of very close Lebanese friends. One of my best friends was Lebanese, and when she's driving, and she's talking to her mom in Lebanon, she gives me the phone. So I have the conversation with her mom in Lebanese accent, and she doesn't realize I'm not her daughter. She just keeps talking to me, which is so there is a part of me in my soul that's a bit Lebanese. And I think it's a form of solidarity, uh, not to just sit and condemn, but to also remember other people's pains and our brothers and sisters' pains, and it is also a part of our story. This is also my story. I was affected by it, and I think in the end, all of our issues are very similar worldwide because no one wants to see their country go through this. No one, no one. Whether it's an American, any person would say, I don't want to see my country go this. And I can relate to that. And even with the domestic violence, even with the pain, even with the female women issues, are it's all global. It's all global. I don't feel like that it's like a country. It's all global. No one wants to see anyone go through pain, and everyone wants to do their part if they can. As small as that part is, let's just all do our part, I think, which is going to help in the end, definitely. And I'm really happy to have had this conversation with you, Sophie.
Me too, Sarah. I was going to say, usually I ask my guest, is there anything you'd like to leave with our audience? And I think you've just said it very, very well.
Yeah.
You've wrapped up the whole conversation. And for everyone who's listening, you can follow Sarah on Instagram. She does have her own website. So please, that's Sarah Aradi. Look her up. If you don't know who I'm talking about, I also follow her on Instagram. So does Levant X. So you cannot get away with it. And all the tags are there. So, also to our listeners, we are a crowd-funded organization. We do rely on donations. So, every little helps. And please, if you are Bahraini and you're listening and you would like to know about the domestic violence hotline, I'm sure you can DM Sarah and she can give you more information on that. So, Sarah, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, my dear. Thank you. Pleasure was mine. Bye.
Bye bye.